Imagine this. You and your partner are in the same room, but it feels like you're living in two completely different worlds.
Yeah, that's a heavily relatable feeling for a lot of people.
Right. I mean, you talk, but there's no connection. You smile, but there's no real happiness. And here is the most painful truth about this whole scenario.
You both still love each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You both still love each other deeply, but the relationship is just like slowly falling apart right in front of you.
And you just don't know why.
Yeah. Why? Why does that happen? So in this deep dive, you'll discover the hidden psychological reasons why modern relationships fail and how to actually fix them.
Because it is fixable. It really is.
It is. And our source material today is a fascinating text called The Silent Drift, Fixing the Psychology of Modern Love. And our mission today is really to unpack this, to explore why these relationships drift into this state of paralysis, and to decode the concrete steps the source provides to reverse it.
And it provides some very actionable frameworks, which I love. But, we have to understand the psychology first.
Totally. So if you're listening to this right now, I want you to think about your own relationships. Have you ever felt that unexplained distance? Because this text makes it clear you are definitely not alone.
Not at all. In fact, the source starts with a story that perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, the story of David and Emma.
Right. David and Emma. They live in New York, and from the outside, they look like the perfect couple.
Oh, I mean, absolute relationship goals. The text talks about their coffee dates, their weekend trips, happy pictures all over social media.
Everyone looking at them thinks they have it all figured out.
But the reality, it's completely different. Emma waits literally every day for David to text her first.
Yeah.
And David, on the other hand, he's just thinking, I'm working so hard for our future. Isn't that enough?
Which is such a massive disconnect.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. It's like they're living with this heavy social media filter over their lives, right?
That's a great way to put it.
Like from the outside, the lighting is perfect, the colors are saturated, but when you zoom in, the structural foundation is just cracking. Why is it so easy for us to maintain the image of a relationship while entirely neglecting the actual internal reality?
Well, what's fascinating here is that we are highly social creatures, right?
Right.
Maintaining the image, the photos, the milestones, that gives us an immediate hit of external validation.
Oh, the dopamine hit from the light.
Exactly. The brain gets a reward when the social group approves of the relationship. So it's performative, but it feels like you're accomplishing something.
Yeah.
But maintaining the internal reality, that requires vulnerability, emotional regulation, constant attunement, and neurologically speaking, that is energetically expensive for the brain.
So it's just easier to post a picture than to have a hard conversation.
Pretty much. It's the profound cognitive dissonance of modern love. The tragedy isn't that David and Emma don't love each other.
Right.
The tragedy is that they are operating on two entirely different definitions of what participation in a relationship actually looks like.
Which perfectly transitions us to this massive mismatch, the source points out. And this is rooted in fundamental psychological differences, right? Like emotional needs versus logical actions.
Yes, exactly. The text notes this critical divide. Many men are conditioned to show love through logical actions.
Like David providing.
Right. Working long hours, planning finances, and many women or partners who lean more toward emotional attunement, they feel love through emotional connection.
Like Emma needing presence.
Yes. So David was providing, but Emma needed presence. And that mismatch creates devastating misunderstanding.
I want to push back on this a little, or at least advocate for David for a second. Because isn't it kind of heartbreaking that David is actually trying?
Oh, it's incredibly sad.
Like his effort isn't zero, but it's completely invisible to Emma. It makes me think of, imagine trying to unlock a new facial recognition smartphone with a physical brass house key.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. Like the effort is there. You're sweating, you're smashing the key against the glass, your intent is totally genuine, but the tool is entirely wrong for the system you're trying to access.
And that's why this specific mismatch breeds so much resentment. David's logic tells him that providing equals loving.
Because he's working so hard.
Exactly. So if he's providing, it's an undeniable fact that he's loving her. But Emma's emotional need tells her that presence equals loving.
So if he's not present, he doesn't love her.
That's her reality, yes. Neither of them is inherently wrong. Providing security is a valid form of love, and seeking emotional attunement is a fundamental human need.
But they're just failing to translate it.
Precisely. The failure to translate these languages means they're bleeding themselves dry, trying to love each other, but the message just gets distorted.
So If they're speaking totally different languages, what happens when they finally try to communicate? Because, one night, the pressure has to boil over.
It always does.
And this brings us to what the Source calls the 4 horsemen of the silent drift. And the first one is the unspoken expectation trap.
This is arguably the most dangerous thing in relationships. Expectations without communication.
Yes. You think, if they really love me, they should just know.
Which is such a trap.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Think about the sheer arrogance of that expectation. Why do we unfairly burden the people we love most with the expectation that they should be psychic?
It's because we've been conditioned by this highly destructive mythology of true love.
The whole fairy tale thing.
Right. The myth tells us that ultimate intimacy means 2 minds flawlessly merging. That if you have to articulate your needs, the love is somehow fake or lesser.
But here is the absolute truth from the text. Love does not equal mind reading.
It really doesn't. When we hold unspoken expectations, we're basically setting up a covert obstacle course in the dark for our partner.
And then getting mad when they trip over a hurdle they couldn't even see.
Exactly. Which leads directly to the second horseman, ego defense.
Right. So let's go back to that night with David and Emma. The tension snaps. Emma says, "You've changed."
3 terrifying words.
And David gets frustrated.
Yeah.
Instead of asking what she means, he just replies, "No, you just expect too much."
And we have to look at the psychology of why he does that. When Emma says, "You've changed," she's trying to express her internal grief and loneliness.
But he doesn't hear that.
No. His amygdala, the threat detection center in his brain, processes her words as a direct existential attack on his identity as a good provider.
Because he's been mashing that brass key against the glass for years.
Yes. And the brain's response to an identity threat is physically identical to its response to a physical predator. Fight or flight kicks in. Cortisol floods his system.
So his ego just throws up a massive wall?
Instantly. In a millisecond, the goal of the conversation shifts. During these arguments, you're not trying to solve the problem anymore.
We're trying to prove that you're right.
Exactly. David becomes a defense attorney protecting his self-worth, and that ego quietly destroys the relationship from the inside out.
Because they aren't even fighting about the relationship anymore. They're fighting for their own survival. And that drops them right into the third horseman, the emotional withdrawal cycle.
This is a very predictable, insidious loop. Fight, hurt, silence, distance, and then more misunderstanding.
And it just repeats again and again.
Until the relationship feels completely empty. Every time Emma reaches out with vulnerability and gets attacked by David's ego defense, her nervous system learns a dangerous lesson.
That it's not safe to express her needs.
Right. So she chooses silence next time. But David reads her silence as coldness, feels unappreciated, and he withdraws.
It's a terrifying feedback loop. You pull away to protect yourself, which makes them pull away to protect themselves.
And each loop removes another layer of emotional safety.
Which brings us to the anatomy of emotional exhaustion. Because the text reveals a really hard truth here. Relationships don't end in one big dramatic moment.
No, they don't.
They end in small, ignored moments. Unanswered texts, unspoken feelings, unresolved conflicts.
The concept here is allostatic load, but applied to intimacy.
Wait, tell me more about that.
Allostatic load is the cumulative wear and tear on biological systems from chronic stress. In a relationship, every time a partner dismisses your feelings or looks at their phone instead of you, it adds a tiny weight.
So what does this all mean for a couple? I kind of compare it to a slow leak in a tire.
That's a perfect analogy.
You don't notice it day to day. You keep driving. But eventually you're driving on the bare metal rim, sparks are flying, and you're wondering how the car was suddenly destroyed. But it wasn't sudden.
No, it was 1,000 miles of ignored deflation. People don't leave because they stopped loving. They leave because they are emotionally exhausted.
They just don't have the energy to keep driving on the rim. And there's this moment in the text that is so painful. One day Emma couldn't take it anymore. She said, "I feel alone, even when I'm with you."
And David stayed silent.
Because he genuinely didn't understand what he was doing wrong.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, David's silence isn't malicious. He is experiencing the terror of watching something he loves break and realizing his logical tools can't fix it.
And that is the most painful place to be. When you feel a problem, but you can't explain it, and your partner just cannot understand it.
The machinery required to transmit the love is hopelessly broken.
So the real question is, can this be fixed?
Yes, but only if you change how you approach the relationship.
Which brings us to the solutions in the source. And the first one is radical honesty. You have to say what you actually feel, even if it's uncomfortable.
Things like, I miss how we used to talk, or I feel disconnected sometimes.
Because truth builds connection, and silence destroys it. But let me play devil's advocate here. Doesn't radical honesty risk starting way more fights if people aren't careful?
It absolutely can, which is why the source makes a crucial distinction between weaponized honesty and radical vulnerability.
Okay, what's the difference?
Weaponized honesty is attacking. It's pointing the finger outward. You never pay attention to me. You're always working. That guarantees an ego defense.
Right, because it's an indictment.
Exactly. But radical vulnerability is pointing the finger inward. It's sharing your own feelings. I'm feeling really lonely lately.
So you take ownership of your feelings without attacking their character.
Right. It bypasses their threat detection system. If Emma says she's lonely, David is invited in to help soothe her, rather than having to defend his work hours.
That makes so much sense. Okay, then there's the next tool, which honestly blew my mind because it's so simple, the 80-20 attention rule.
I love this one.
The text says most relationship problems come from a lack of attention. And the fix is just 10 to 15 minutes a day of full, undivided attention. No phone, no distractions.
It sounds almost too easy, right?
And we easily spend triple that amount of time mindlessly scrolling on our phones while sitting on the toilet.
Yeah.
And yet, 15 minutes could literally save a marriage.
Well, let's break down the psychology of undivided presence. When you're on the couch for 3 hours, but you're both scrolling on your phones, you are physically adjacent, but emotionally absent.
You're in those two different worlds again.
Exactly. You aren't co-regulating. But when you put the devices away and have 15 minutes of sustained eye contact and active listening, it stimulates the vagus nerve. It releases oxytocin.
The bonding hormone.
Right. 15 minutes of that provides more psychological safety than 5 hours of sitting in the same room staring at screens.
It's like plugging your phone directly into the wall for a supercharge instead of a faulty wireless pad.
Perfect comparison. It tells the brain the connection is secure.
But, of course, they're human. Conflicts are going to come up during those honest conversations. So how do they stop from falling back into the ego defense cycle?
The source gives us rules for that too. And the first one is emotional validation.
Yes. Before fixing the problem, validate the feeling. Never say, you're overreacting.
That is the worst thing you can say.
Instead, you say, I understand why you feel this way. I read that and thought of it like a psychological pressure release valve.
That's exactly what it is. This raises an important question, though. Why do we rush to fix instead of validate?
Because fixing feels productive.
Yes, but when you fix with logic before validating the emotion, you're telling your partner their feelings are just an inconvenient obstacle.
Which makes them yell louder to be heard.
Exactly. People resist validating because they think it means agreeing with the facts of the accusation.
Oh, wow. That's a huge distinction.
It is. Validating an emotion isn't agreeing with the facts. David doesn't have to agree he's a terrible husband. He just has to acknowledge Emma's reality. I understand why you feel lonely.
Once that's said, the steam releases, the hostility deflates, and then you can actually look at the problem together.
Because their nervous system calms down. And once they are calm, they have to fight smart, not hard.
Which means no yelling, no blaming, and definitely no bringing up the past.
Right, no kitchen sinking. Focus purely on solving the immediate problem, not attacking the person.
And finally, to maintain that connection, the text talks about small rituals.
Rebuilding connection through daily micro-investments.
Things like daily good morning texts, weekly date nights, random appreciation.
These act as the antithesis to those small, ignored moments we talked about earlier. They actively counteract the slow leak in the tire.
So, to the listener out there, I want to challenge you right now. Can you try integrating just one of these small rituals into your relationship today? Like just send a random text of appreciation.
I want to leave the listener with a final, unmentioned thought to ponder, really building on what the source says.
Okay, what's that?
We've established that relationships slowly die by 1,000 tiny, unacknowledged cuts. Unanswered texts, ignored feelings. But could the exact opposite be true?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
What if a relationship could be made completely bulletproof? Not by grand, expensive romantic gestures, but by 1,000 tiny, deliberately acknowledged moments?
Wow.
What if we stopped treating love like a house we bought and never have to look at again, and started treating it like a garden that must be watered every single day?
That is incredibly profound. Treat it like a garden. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the psychology of modern love.
It's a pleasure.
And to our listeners, if you found value in this deep dive, take these tools and use them. We'll catch you next time.